Intermittent fasting can be one of the easiest ways to start improving your health, but the topic can be really confusing. Well, in this video, my plan is to give you a complete guide so that you can make intermittent fasting a habit in your own life. In this video, we're going to be talking about what the heck is IF, how to get started using the EGOR method. I'm going to answer a couple common questions, and then we're going to jump into the pros and cons of this habit. Feel free to jump around this video using the chapters in the timeline. And before we get into the video, my name is Mike, and we're all about exploring how to become the healthiest versions of ourselves. Also, by the way, this is not medical advice. Please advise your doctor before making any serious decisions in your life. So for starters, let's actually break down what fasting is. The word fast itself means to go without. And in this specific scenario, it means to abstain from eating calories for a period of time. This is done by separating our eating and our fasting times. And there's many different examples of this. For example, daily fasting. The most common one is 16-8, where you go 16 hours fasting and then you consume food for 8 hours. Other examples are 18-6, 24, and even OMAD, where you eat just one meal a day. Then there's also prolonged fasting, which is a fast that's 24 hours plus. And there's also fasting days. For example, alternate day fasting, or only fasting maybe once a week. What I find really interesting is a lot of people are really opposed to this idea of going without food. A lot of them think that either one, it's starving ourselves. Yes, it can get to the point of malnutrition. However, you don't want to push it to that point, and also you need to be supplementing properly if you're doing these prolonged fasts. But the difference is, starving is using our muscles and our organ tissue to actually convert into energy and keep us alive and going. And on the contrary, fasting is actually just using our stored fat for energy, which we're designed to do. So if we think back to our ancestors, they didn't have 24/7 access to food like you and I do. We are very privileged to have this opportunity in our lives. They would, for example, go on a hunt and say they were successful. They would then eat an excessive amount of food, and the energy from that meal would first fill up our muscles and our liver with the carbs that we ate, which would total out at 500. 400 in our muscles, and then 100 in our liver. And by the way, one carb is equal to 4 calories, so that would mean we'd have roughly 2,000 calories ready to go in our body. But then the rest is actually stored as fat in our body. And interestingly enough, 1 pound of fat is equivalent to 3,000 calories. 1 pound! So if we're able to use that energy source, like, wow, just, yes please. But the thing is, even though our bodies are designed to do this, we're not all the most efficient at it. And also, our body hasn't really been trained to be good at it. The reason why is, for the majority of us, since we've came out of the womb, we've been eating throughout the entire day for every hour that we're awake. And also, we've been loading up on a crap ton of carbs. So we're not really allowing our body to even utilize the other energy sources we have available for us. So we're more or less signaling to our body that, hey, you're always gonna have carbs. You don't have to use these other processes of making energy. So like, don't worry about it. We're good to go. I'm always gonna give you these carbs. Therefore making our bodies not as efficient at doing this method. Later on in the video, I'm going to be explaining which fasting type is best for our unique bodies. Also, I'm going to stop the video here for 1 second. If you're enjoying the video so far, please be sure to like and subscribe down below. I would really appreciate it. All right, let's keep going. All right, let's talk about how to actually get started with intermittent fasting. The best advice that someone can give you is there's no one case fits all solution. You probably see in your favorite expert doing a specific protocol, but I'm here to say that that's not necessarily the right one for you. and it really depends on what your goals are, your health history, and how you feel on that specific eating and fasting window. But to make this whole process easier, we can actually use the EGOR method. And I'm gonna break it down right now. So step one is to evaluate. We actually wanna ask ourselves, what are our goals with IF? Like, what do we really want to get out of this? For a lot of people, it's to lose weight. For others, it's gonna be cellular cleanup, which comes through the amazing process of autophagy and goes in and basically cleans up all the inefficient cells, for example, our mitochondria, and then replaces them with young, healthy ones that are gonna be way more efficient and beneficial for our bodies. And if you're interested in learning more about this, I'm gonna link a research paper down below called The Metabolic Switch and a podcast episode from The Genius Life. The next thing we wanna do is assess our health history. Are we like person A, where we're usually sedentary the majority of the day, hardly ever really exercising, really just eating whatever the heck we want at that given moment, and are just sleeping 6 hours a day? Or are we like person B, where we're exercising regularly, eating a paleo diet, and getting 8 hours of sleep? Or you may be somewhere in between. Really give an honest assessment of yourself. And also, to quickly mention, if you are any of these specific criteria here, fasting is not gonna be for you. The only exception on this list is going to be diabetes, and there's a doctor called Dr. Jason Fung, and he's successfully actually been able to use fasting and a couple other protocols to reverse diabetes in a lot of his patients. So I'd recommend checking that out. But if you're on this list, again, fasting's not for you. It's not a good idea. It is a tool in the toolkit and is not supposed to be used at every given moment in life. So now we have step two, which is gradual. This one was really tough for myself because I really like to push myself, and I'll see my favorite health expert doing something and I'll immediately be like, oh, I need to be doing that right away. I can't work my way up to it. So I would recommend starting off at 12 hours. Only if you've fasted before, maybe you can start off with a little bit more, but the best way is gonna be to start there, and then every day you can add 1 additional hour until you get to the ideal range, which is gonna be at 16-8. That's where a majority of people usually feel comfortable. Next, we have step 3, which is going to be evaluate. So now that we're fasting, we wanna really ask ourselves, how do we feel? Do we have headaches? Is our stomach constantly grumbling? Do we feel like shit? If that's the case, open up your window a little bit and then see how you feel in that scenario. Again, what's good for someone else is not always gonna be good for you. We have to remember that fasting is stress on the body, and you might be having a crap ton of stress from a bunch of different other things in your environment. So there's different ways to do fasting, and maybe that's not the best approach for you specifically. And once again, keep in mind, fasting is a tool. You don't always have to be using it 24/7, and we also don't want to abuse it. A very common thing is people will take a habit, for example, keto, and try to push it to the extreme and stay in it as long as possible. That doesn't apply to fasting. We want to get time in fasting, but trust me, I'll explain later how I abused it like crazy with prolonged fasts and 1 meal a day. You don't want to be there. You really don't. And then the final step is regularity. We want to stay consistent with whatever eating and fasting window that we've decided. Because we need to remember that just like light, food also trains our biological systems, letting our body know when to do certain things. Also, one interesting thing that I would recommend is to, instead of skipping breakfast, skip your dinner. I learned about this after reading this paper that talked about early time-restricted feeding to actually align our circadian rhythms and metabolism with our eating window. And the study found that improves our insulin sensitivity. By the way, this is ideal because insulin resistance would be the opposite, and If you're in that state, you're usually pre-diabetic, so it allows our body to actually perform the proper processes when we release insulin in our body, instead of having a ton of it and just being not sensitive to it at all. And it talked about how it improves our insulin sensitivity, our blood pressure, and reduces oxidative stress in our body. I've actually tested this out in my own life for the last 3 weeks, and I find it way more favorable to skip dinner than breakfast, and for myself at least, it is a lot easier. So just try it out, see how you like it. All right, now I want to kind of break down some couple common questions about the topic. What's the best way to track my fast? The best way I've used is this app called Zero Fasting. It makes it really simple to do it every single day. Also, there's a bunch of great theory that kind of supports you and helps you along this process. What breaks my fast? I'd personally recommend only consuming water, coffee, tea, and anything that you know is actually going to improve the effects of your fast. I know there's a lot of purists out there that say just water, but honestly, there's a lot of benefits from these other compounds. And you can learn more about this in Dave Asprey's new book called Fast This Way. It's also in my reading list queue. A quick little note here. Research has shown that coffee is beneficial when you're fasting purely because the polyphenols increase the amount of autophagy. Autophagy is the cleaning up process of our mitochondria throughout our body. But personally for myself, when I consume coffee on an empty stomach, it usually hurts, so try it out for yourself, but I might just have a crappy stomach. Also, the coffee has to be just black, no milk, no cream, and no artificial sweeteners. Even artificial sweeteners can provide an insulin response, and that's not what we want. What food should I break my fast with? For a general 16 8-hour fast, I've found that it doesn't matter as much, but for those longer, prolonged fasts, a good way is going to be consuming bone broth. The collagen from that is going to actually help soothe our stomach, because during these longer fasts, we're actually damaging just a little bit our gut lining, so it'll help improve that whole process. And you can learn more about this in a video down below about the importance of bone broth. The last one is, are you going to lose muscle while fasting? The short answer is no. There's a research paper down below from the Journal of Translational Medicine talking about an 8-week trial of healthy, active men versus control, and they didn't lose any muscle. And then finally, we have the pros and cons of intermittent fasting. Let's start off with the pros. So the majority of times you're going to experience weight loss. The main reason is going to be because you're usually in a caloric deficit, because if you skip one meal, on average, you're going to be consuming 20 to 40% less calories throughout the day, meaning how much you're burning versus how much you're consuming will be in a negative, therefore you'll be losing weight. Also, because you're going through a longer period of not producing insulin, that also helps out as well. Next, we have hormetic effects, which comes from hormesis and is small amounts of stress on the body. A great common example is exercise. Exercise in small amounts can be great because our body comes back stronger than ever after. But in excess, it can have detrimental effects on our body. The same thing is relative to fasting. In small amounts, it can have lots of benefits on our mitochondria, helping us age slower. By the way, they're the energy makers of the cell. Next, we can become way closer to becoming metabolically flexible, a state where our body really doesn't care where we're getting the energy from. We'll just more so have consistent energy levels, and our ghrelin, which is our hunger hormone, will stay pretty consistent and will always be satiated. This is in an ideal state, and time-restricted feeding helps us get to this point. Next, we'll have an improved hormonal profile from an increase of human growth hormone. Another thing is we're gonna now be able to more efficiently use the energy that we're providing. Because we have longer periods of time where our insulin is stabilized, we're then able to become more insulin sensitive, therefore allowing our body to respond better when we release insulin on our body, being more sensitive to it. What's interesting is nowadays we're really taught to eat 3 meals a day and snack in between all of those. So we're really eating all the time, always triggering these insulin responses, which leads us down the path to insulin resistance and then potentially even diabetes. Also, there's been a link with more insulin in the body can relate to more oxidative stress. Oxidative stress can cause a whole bunch of bad things in the body. I'm gonna link another research paper down below. Then we can also have mental sharpness. This is largely gonna come from ketone production, which is gonna come from longer fasts. And ketones versus glucose are just going to be a cleaner source for our brain to function off of. You've probably heard a lot of people being in ketosis and how they feel just freaking amazing and how they have no brain fog and they can just think like that. It's true, like it actually does feel like that. It's pretty dang cool. But it takes a bit of time for your glucose storages to go all the way down and for your body to start making ketones. So it's not really gonna happen in a 16 8-hour fast on average, usually more in those prolonged fasts. And then the last one, which I think is one of the most important and helps us age way slower, is autophagy. It's a technical way of saying cellular cleanup, but it just goes in and clears out all your damaged and inefficient cells and then replaces them with new ones, which is great for us. And then we have the cons of intermittent fasting. There's 3 main ones here. The first one is it can be abused really easily. There's this general rule of thumb with almost every health habit where we need to push it to the limit. Intermittent fasting is not like that. It's stress on the body. And as I mentioned before with hormesis, if you push it too far, you're gonna have negative effects. It can be the same thing with saunaing excessively, going into ice baths excessively, exercising excessively. They're all various ways of attaining hormesis on the body. But stress comes from so many different areas. Maybe you have kids, maybe you have a stressful job. If we push all of this stress too much on our body, it's not gonna be good. Let's use myself as an example. So at the beginning of this year, I ended up getting more into fasting. I had done 18-6 in the past, but I really wanted to try OMAD and prolonged fasting. So I ramped up to OMAD as fast as possible, which, keeping in mind that is not aligned with my circadian rhythms and metabolism, and it was really close to my bedtime, in the realm of less than 3 hours, which is not ideal, so my sleep was shitty. I'm talking like 3,000 calories in that window of time. Also on top of this, like once a month, I was doing prolonged fasts. I did a 7-day fast, I did multiple 3-day fasts, I did a 5-day fast. This is a lot of freaking stress on the body. I'm already doing OMAD, which is a lot of fasting time. Plus this, I pushed myself to the brink. And unfortunately, I caused some damage, and now I'm trying to fix it at the moment. So please learn from my mistakes. Again, just because your favorite professional is doing a specific thing doesn't mean that you should be doing it as well. I'm currently doing 16-8, by the way. Seriously, do what works best for you and try it out. There's not a lot of long-term research in this whole area. There's a lot of short-term research, but there's no like 10, 20, 30-year trials of people doing fasting. So keep that in mind. And then the last one, it can be a pretty confusing topic. There are so many people talking about it. It was a huge fad a couple years ago. So there's a lot of misinformation out there. I really want to inspire you to start doing more research, and I hope this kind of got you excited and built a good foundation for you. A really great resource is what I mentioned before, but it's Dave Asprey's book called Fast This Way. It's really gonna help give you a good foundation, and I've heard so many great things so far. It's where I'm gonna be going very soon. All right, that's the video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you're interested in more content like this, be sure to check out my video of my productivity/biohacking desk setup so we can maximize our comfort while we're working from home. All right, I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.